Two Harvard law graduates, one chamber, 6 years of history about to explode. Adam Schiff attacked first. Senator Cruz represents the most dangerous elements of modern politics, Harvard-educated demagogues who use credentials to spread lies. It was a devastating opening. Schiff had done this 1,000 times. Attack, dominate, control the narrative. But he'd forgotten something important about Ted Cruz. Before politics, Cruz was a Supreme Court clerk, a constitutional scholar, someone who builds cases the way architects build skyscrapers, foundation first, every piece supporting the next. For 6 years, Cruz had been building. Now, as Schiff finished his attack, Cruz reached for his briefcase. Inside were folders that would systematically destroy everything Schiff had spent 6 years constructing. Every Russia claim, every fabrication, every lie told while classified briefings said the opposite. Schiff wanted a political fight. Cruz had prepared a legal execution. The deep state's top liar versus Harvard law's finest. This is going to be a massacre. Let's go. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room crackled with tension. Adam Schiff swept in like he owned the place. Designer suit media entourage, that smug smile that had tormented conservatives for 6 years. Today he'd destroyed Ted Cruz once and for all. Cruz sat quietly reviewing thick folders, the calm of a Supreme Court advocate who'd spent months preparing for this moment. Schiff didn't waste time. He was going for the throat immediately. Senator Cruz, the American people need to understand the danger of having conspiracy theorists in positions of authority. You represent the most dangerous elements of modern politics, Harvard-educated demagogues who use credentials to spread lies and undermine democratic institutions. His voice rose with theatrical outrage. Your shameful record of attacking our intelligence agencies, promoting Russian talking points, and spreading dangerous misinformation makes you fundamentally unfit for oversight of national security institutions. The chamber hung on every word. Democrats smiled. Media prepared for viral clips. You are quite simply a threat to the constitutional order you pretend to defend. Perfect. Schiff had just walked straight into the trap. Cruz smiled. Not angry, not defensive, the calm smile of someone holding a royal flush. Congressman Schiff, thank you for that remarkably projection-heavy assessment. He opened his briefcase. Thick folders spilled out, classified markings everywhere. Since you've raised questions about conspiracy theories, systematic disinformation, and threats to democratic institutions, perhaps we should examine the actual record of who has been deceiving the American people. Schiff's confident smirk flickered, just for a second, but everyone saw it. I have here recently declassified evidence that will show Americans exactly who the real conspiracy theorist and systematic liar actually is. Cruz pulled out the first folder, Schiff Deception Files Declassified. The room suddenly realized what was happening. This wasn't typical political theater. Cruz had evidence, real evidence, classified evidence. Schiff had attacked a constitutional scholar who'd spent months building a case like he was arguing before the Supreme Court. Because Congressman, projection is a hell of a thing, and you've been projecting for 6 long years. The hunter had just become the hunted. Smash, like if you see Schiff about to get annihilated, comment, hoax master, if you've waited 6 years for justice. This constitutional scholar is about to drop bombs. Ted Cruz opened his first folder with the methodical precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. The documents inside would systematically destroy Schiff's credibility and expose the biggest political lie in American history. Congressman Schiff, for over 3 years you appeared on television programs 237 times. Yes, my staff meticulously counted every single appearance, claiming to have personally seen evidence in plain sight of collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. Cruz's voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd done his homework. These weren't casual comments or offhand remarks. These were deliberate, repeated public statements made by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee claiming direct knowledge of treasonous activity by a sitting president. He gestured to the chamber's main screens, which lit up with a video compilation. Let me refresh America's memory of your specific claims. The montage began playing, 3 years of Adam Schiff's most confident television appearances. March 22nd, 2017, CNN. I can tell you that the case is more than circumstantial. We have evidence of collusion in plain sight. July 30th, 2017, MSNBC. There is more than circumstantial evidence now of coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia. January 8th, 2018, ABC. The evidence of collusion is hiding in plain sight, and Americans can see it. September 18th, 2018, CBS. The evidence of collusion is overwhelming and undeniable. February 4th, 2019, CNN. We have significant evidence of conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russians. The montage continued for several minutes, showing Schiff's unwavering confidence across dozens of appearances. Each clip was more damning than the last, building a picture of systematic deception. When the video ended, the chamber was silent. The weight of 3 years of lies hung in the air. Congressman Schiff, Cruz continued, you didn't just make these claims once or twice, you made them consistently, repeatedly, and with absolute certainty for over 1,000 days. But here's what you actually knew from the classified intelligence briefings you received as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Cruz began displaying declassified FBI intelligence assessments on the chamber's screens. Each document bore official seals and classification markings. January 6, 2017, FBI Counterintelligence Division briefing to House Intelligence Committee, and I quote directly from the official record, no evidence of coordination between Trump campaign and Russian government has been identified through this investigation. The first document was devastating in its clarity. March 20th, 2017, CIA intelligence assessment briefed to your committee. Continued investigation has found no evidence of collusion or conspiracy between Trump associates and Russian intelligence services. June 15, 2017, National Security Agency report delivered to Intelligence Committee. Comprehensive signals intelligence analysis has produced no evidence of coordination between any Trump campaign officials and Russian government entities. October 12, 2017, FBI investigative update to committee leadership. After 10 months of investigation, no evidence supporting allegations of collusion has been discovered. Cruz continued reading from briefing after briefing, each one telling Schiff the same thing, no evidence. Congressman, over the course of 3 years, you received 19 separate classified briefings from the FBI, CIA, and NSA that explicitly, consistently, and unambiguously told you there was no evidence supporting your claims of collusion. The mathematical reality was devastating. Let me break this down in terms that even the media can understand. Cruz pulled out a calculator with theatrical precision. 19 intelligence briefings telling you no evidence of collusion. 237 television appearances claiming overwhelming evidence of collusion. That's a ratio of 12.5 lies for every single truth you were told by America's intelligence agencies. The calculation was devastating in its simplicity. Congressman Schiff, you took classified intelligence briefings that consistently said no collusion and transformed them into media appearances where you claimed obvious collusion. Cruz's voice began to rise with moral authority. This wasn't evolving intelligence. This wasn't careful analysis of ambiguous information. This wasn't even honest disagreement about interpretation. This was systematic, deliberate, calculated deception of the American people for partisan political purposes. Schiff tried to interrupt, but Cruz wasn't finished with his evisceration. You lied to mothers who feared their president was a traitor. You lied to fathers who questioned their vote. You lied to children who asked their parents if America was safe. You spent 3 years terrorizing the American people with claims you knew were false. Schiff finally managed to get a word in. Senator, the intelligence was evolving, and we had a constitutional duty to investigate these serious allegations. Cruz's response was swift and devastating. Congressman, the intelligence wasn't evolving, it was consistent. For 3 straight years, every single intelligence briefing told you the exact same thing, no evidence. But you ignored America's intelligence professionals and continued lying because it served your political ambitions and made you a cable news celebrity. You didn't have a constitutional duty to lie. You had a constitutional duty to tell the truth to the American people who trusted you with classified information. Cruz began laying out the timeline of deception with prosecutorial precision. Here's what really happened during your 3-year disinformation campaign. Day 1, FBI tells you no evidence of collusion. Day 1, you go on CNN claiming evidence of collusion. Day 30, CIA tells you no evidence of collusion. Day 30, you go on MSNBC claiming more evidence of collusion. Day 90, NSA tells you no evidence of collusion. Day 90, you go on ABC claiming overwhelming evidence of collusion. For 1095 consecutive days, you chose lies over truth politics, over country and personal media fame, over constitutional duty. The moral condemnation was complete and undeniable. Congressman, you spent 3 years dividing families, destroying faith in elections, undermining confidence in government, and tearing apart the social fabric of our country with systematic lies. All while receiving classified briefings that told you it was false. Cruz leaned forward with the intensity of someone delivering ultimate moral judgment. That's not congressional oversight. That's not protecting democracy. That's not even partisan politics. That's systematic deception that rises to the level of treason against the truth and betrayal of the American people's trust. Schiff sat visibly shaken, the confident media performer replaced by someone realizing that his years of lies were being systematically exposed with documented evidence. The Russia collusion hoax, his greatest political achievement, was crumbling before his eyes. Comment liar. If you think Schiff deceived America, share this truth before they try to memory hole the Russia hoax. Drop A if you remember his 3 years of lies. Cruz reached for his second folder and his demeanor shifted from prosecutorial to something more personal and morally outraged. What he was about to reveal would prove that Schiff wasn't just a systematic liar. He was someone who would commit perjury before Congress to remove a duly elected president. Now, Congressman, let's discuss what I consider the most egregious single act of deception in your entire career, your complete fabrication of the Ukraine phone call transcript during impeachment proceedings. The chamber tensed. Everyone remembered the Ukraine impeachment, but few recalled the specific details of how it began. On September 26, 2019, during a House Intelligence Committee hearing broadcast live to the American people, you stood before Congress and claimed to read the essence of President Trump's phone call with Ukraine's president. Cruz produced the official hearing transcript, but you didn't read the actual transcript, did you, Congressman? Instead, you fabricated an entirely different conversation and presented it as if it were real. Cruz began playing audio of Schiff's performance from the impeachment hearing. This is in sum and character what the president communicates. We've been very good to your country, very good. No other country has done as much as we have. But you know what? I don't see much reciprocity here. I hear what you want. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it, on this and on that. I'm going to put you in touch with people, not just any people, but people who are going to be very good to you. But you need to understand that favor I need from you, though. You're in it now up to your eyeballs, and we're going to ruin you if you don't give us what we want. The audio was chilling. It sounded like a mob boss threatening a victim. That was your version, Congressman. Let me now read what President Trump actually said according to the official White House transcript. Cruz's voice took on a completely different tone as he read the real transcript. I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server, they say Ukraine has it. The contrast was absolutely devastating. Congressman Schiff, you transformed a request for investigation into corruption into a mob-style threat to make up dirt. You inserted words that were never spoken. You fabricated quotes that never existed. You created an entirely fictional conversation. You committed perjury before Congress and the American people. Cruz pulled out legal precedents about perjury before Congress. Under Title 18, Section 1621 of the U.S. Code, making false statements under oath before Congress is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. You didn't just lie, Congressman. You committed a federal crime on live television. When confronted with the evidence, Schiff offered his now infamous defense. That was clearly a parody. Everyone understood it was a parody. Cruz's response was nuclear in its intensity. Parody? His voice echoed through the chamber. Congressman, you were conducting an impeachment hearing. You were under oath. You were reading what you specifically told the American people was the essence and sum and character of the president's actual words. This wasn't Saturday Night Live, Congressman. This was the United States Congress considering whether to remove a duly elected president from office. Cruz's constitutional expertise came to the fore. There is no such thing as parody in sworn congressional testimony. There is only truth and perjury. There is only fact and fiction. There is only honesty and fraud. You committed perjury before Congress, and when caught red-handed, you had the audacity to call it a parody. Cruz began outlining the constitutional implications. You used your fabricated, perjurious version of that phone call to justify impeaching a president of the United States. You lied under oath to overturn a democratic election. You committed fraud to remove a duly elected leader. You perverted the constitutional impeachment process with systematic deception. The moral weight of the accusation was crushing. Congressman, impeachment is the most serious constitutional remedy available to Congress. It's designed to remove presidents who commit high crimes and misdemeanors. But you turned it into political theater based on lies, fabrications, and perjury. You didn't just attack President Trump, Congressman. You attacked the constitutional order itself. Cruz's voice rose to fill the entire chamber. When you fabricate evidence to impeach a president, you're not protecting democracy, you're destroying it. When you commit perjury to overturn elections, you're not defending the Constitution, you're attacking it. When you lie under oath to remove elected officials, you're not serving the American people, you're betraying them. Schiff sat in stunned silence, unable to defend the indefensible. His parody defense had been exposed as the desperate excuse of someone caught committing perjury on national television. The Ukraine phone call fabrication, which had led to a presidential impeachment, was revealed as nothing more than Schiff's criminal fiction. Comment: perjury. If you remember this, Li. He fabricated evidence to impeach a president. If this still makes you angry, Cruz opened his third folder with grim determination. What he was about to reveal would prove that Schiff hadn't just lied about Russian collusion or fabricated impeachment evidence. He had actively interfered in a presidential election by coordinating the suppression of truthful information. Congressman Schiff, let's now discuss how you coordinated the biggest election interference operation in American history, the systematic suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story in the weeks before the 2020 presidential election. The room fell silent. The laptop story had been controversial, but few understood the full scope of how it had been suppressed. The timeline of your deception is crucial for Americans to understand. Cruz began displaying a detailed chronological analysis on the chamber screens. October 14, 2020, 11:00 a.m. The New York Post publishes its first story about Hunter Biden's laptop containing evidence of potential corruption involving Joe Biden and his family's international business dealings. October 14, 2020, 3:47 p.m., less than 5 hours after the story breaks. You appear on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, claiming the laptop story is Russian disinformation despite having zero evidence to support that claim. October 14, 2020, 8:23 p.m., you appear on MSNBC's Rachel Maddow show doubling down on the disinformation claim and calling for social media platforms to suppress the story. The speed of Schiff's response was damning in itself. But here's what makes your actions criminal, Congressman. Cruz produced FBI authentication documents. The FBI's Digital Forensics Laboratory had authenticated Hunter Biden's laptop and its contents in December 2019, nearly a full year before the New York Post story. You knew the laptop was authentic when you called it Russian disinformation. You knew the contents were real when you claimed they were fabricated. You knew you were lying when you told the American people it was foreign interference. But Cruz wasn't finished exposing the conspiracy. Within hours of your television appearances, you coordinated with former intelligence officials to create what became known as the 51 Intelligence Officials Letter. Cruz displayed phone records and communication logs. October 15, 2020, 7:23 ES a.m. Phone call from your office to John Brennan, former CIA director. October 15, 2020, 8:45 a.m. Conference call including James Clapper, former director of national intelligence. October 15, 2020, 11:30 a.m. Email chain coordinating the letter's language and signature collection. October 19, 2020. Publication of letters signed by 51 former intelligence officials claiming the laptop story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. The coordination was systematic and damning. But the most criminal aspect of your operation, Congressman, was your direct coordination with social media platforms to censor American citizens and suppress legitimate journalism. Cruz produced records that had been subpoenaed from social media companies. October 14, 2020, 6:47 p.m., phone call from your congressional office to Facebook's policy team. October 14, 2020, 7:23 p.m., phone call from your staff to Twitter's content moderation division. October 14, 2020, 8:15 p.m., email from your office to YouTube's policy enforcement team. All within hours of the New York Post story breaking. The evidence of coordination was overwhelming. The results of your government censorship campaign were immediate and devastating to American democracy. Twitter locked the New York Post's account for 2 weeks. Facebook reduced the story's distribution by 95%, preventing millions of Americans from seeing it. YouTube removed videos discussing the laptop contents, silencing independent journalists and commentators. Google suppressed search results related to the story. Cruz's voice rose with constitutional authority. Congressman, you used your position as a government official to pressure private companies to censor American citizens before a presidential election. That's not oversight. That's not protecting democracy. That's election interference. The constitutional violation was clear and unprecedented. The First Amendment prohibits government officials from suppressing political speech. You violated the constitutional rights of every American who wanted to read, share, or discuss that story. But Cruz saved the most damning evidence for last. Post-election polling conducted by multiple independent organizations revealed the impact of your censorship campaign. Cruz displayed polling data from several sources. 73% of Biden voters said they were unaware of the laptop story contents. Of those voters, 51% said knowledge of the story would have changed their vote. In an election decided by approximately 44,000 votes across 3 swing states, your systematic suppression of truthful information potentially altered the outcome of a presidential election. The implications were staggering. Congressman Schiff, you didn't just lie to the American people, you coordinated with big tech to silence them before they could vote with full information. You didn't just suppress a news story, you potentially stole a presidential election through systematic censorship and disinformation. Cruz delivered the final moral judgment. For 4 years, you claimed to be protecting democracy from foreign interference, but you were the foreign interference, working with former intelligence officials who had financial ties to foreign governments to suppress information American voters deserve to know. You became the very thing you claimed to be fighting against. Schiff was now visibly shaken, his confident media persona cracking under the weight of documented evidence showing his role in the biggest censorship operation in American political history. Comment: election interference. If you think he stole 2020, he censored the truth to help Biden. Share if you want justice for election theft. Cruz reached for his fourth folder, his expression growing more serious as he prepared to expose what many constitutional scholars considered the gravest abuse of government surveillance powers in American history. Congressman Schiff, as someone who has argued surveillance cases before the Supreme Court of the United States, let's now discuss your systematic abuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court system to spy on American citizens. The FISA abuse scandal had been covered in the media, but Cruz was about to reveal the full scope of constitutional violations that had occurred under Schiff's oversight. The FISA court system was created to protect American citizens from government surveillance abuse while allowing necessary intelligence gathering for national security. It operates under the strictest constitutional requirements and demands absolute honesty from government officials. Cruz began displaying official FISA court documents. Between October 2016 and June 2017, you signed off on 4 separate FISA warrant applications to conduct electronic surveillance on Carter Page and other American citizens associated with the Trump campaign. Each application was based primarily on the Steele dossier, which you knew was fabricated opposition research funded by Hillary Clinton's campaign. The evidence was meticulously documented. But here's what makes your actions criminal, Congressman. Cruz produced declassified FBI communications. Internal FBI communications from August 2016, 2 months before the first FISA application, show that FBI investigators had already determined the Steele dossier was unreliable and likely disinformation. You knew the evidence was fabricated when you used it to obtain secret surveillance warrants. You knew it was opposition research when you presented it as intelligence. You knew it was Clinton campaign material when you called it foreign intelligence. Cruz displayed more damning evidence. The Justice Department Inspector General's report documented that you and your committee systematically omitted exculpatory evidence from FISA applications. Evidence that contradicted the surveillance requests. Evidence that would have invalidated the warrants. Evidence that showed American citizens were innocent of the crimes you were investigating. The constitutional violations were staggering. Congressman, you violated the Fourth Amendment rights of American citizens by obtaining surveillance warrants through fraud, deception, and systematic omission of exculpatory evidence. Cruz produced a letter from FISA Court Presiding Judge Rosemary Collyer. FISA Court Presiding Judge Rosemary Collyer wrote to the FBI stating that your committee had deceived the court and committed systematic abuse of surveillance authorities. A federal judge stated that you deceived a court to spy on American citizens. Cruz's voice rose with constitutional authority. Let me be clear about what this means, Congressman. You turned the House Intelligence Committee into a secret police operation targeting political opponents. You used the most powerful surveillance tools in the American government against innocent American citizens. You violated their constitutional rights, invaded their privacy, and destroyed their reputations based on evidence you knew was false. But the abuse went even deeper. Our investigation has revealed that surveillance information obtained through your fraudulent FISA warrants was systematically leaked to media outlets. Cruz displayed phone records showing calls between Schiff's office and major news organizations immediately after receiving classified surveillance briefings. You didn't just illegally spy on Americans' congressmen, you leaked the illegally obtained information to destroy them in the media. That's not intelligence oversight. That's not national security. That's systematic tyranny. Cruz pulled out his pocket constitution with dramatic effect. The Fourth Amendment states, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated." You violated that amendment systematically, deliberately, and repeatedly. You turned American intelligence capabilities against American citizens for political purposes. Congressman, you didn't just abuse the FISA court system, you turned the United States government into a police state apparatus targeting political opponents. The moral condemnation was complete. This is exactly what the founders feared when they wrote the Constitution. Government officials who would use state power against political enemies. You became the domestic enemy that every government official swears to defend against. Schiff could only sit in stunned silence as his systematic abuse of surveillance powers was exposed with documented evidence, court findings, and constitutional analysis. Drop A if FISA abuse disgusts you. He turned America into a police state. Comment, surveillance state. If you're outraged by this tyranny, Cruz opened his final folder with the solemnity of someone about to expose the most systematic fraud ever perpetrated by a congressional committee. This wasn't just about partisan politics anymore. This was about the complete corruption of congressional investigative powers. Finally, Congressman Schiff, let's discuss your crown jewel of deception, the January 6th committee, and the systematic fraud you perpetrated on the American people in the name of investigating that day's events. The January 6th committee had been Schiff's attempt at redemption after the Russia hoax collapsed, but Cruz was about to reveal it as an even more egregious abuse of power. The January 6th committee was supposedly created to investigate the events of that day and provide recommendations to prevent future incidents. Instead, you turned it into a partisan prosecution designed to destroy political opponents. Cruz began displaying evidence of systematic procedural violations. You denied Republicans the right to appoint their own members to the committee, violating 150 years of congressional precedent. You refused to allow cross-examination of witnesses, denying basic due process. You selectively edited video evidence to create false narratives. You suppressed exculpatory evidence that contradicted your predetermined conclusions. You coached witnesses to provide false testimony under oath. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. We have obtained evidence that you personally met with key witnesses before their testimony to coordinate their answers and coach them to make specific claims. Cruz produced meeting logs and communication records. July 15, 2022, private meeting between your staff and Cassidy Hutchinson 2 weeks before her public testimony. Internal committee emails show you directed staff to prepare Ms. Hutchinson for maximum impact during her appearance. Witness preparation notes include specific talking points about claims that committee investigators knew were false. The evidence of witness tampering was overwhelming. Congressman, you coached Cassidy Hutchinson to make false claims about President Trump's actions in the presidential limousine, claims that Secret Service agents were prepared to contradict under oath. You knew the claims were false when you coached her to make them. That's not witness preparation, Congressman. That's subornation of perjury. Cruz displayed more evidence of systematic fraud. You suppressed 14,000 hours of security footage that contradicted your narrative. You refused to investigate Nancy Pelosi's security failures that contributed to the breach. You hid exculpatory evidence about police actions that invited protesters into the Capitol. You edited video evidence to remove context that would have changed the entire narrative. The scope of evidence suppression was staggering. But most damning of all, you operated the committee like a corrupt prosecutor trying to frame an innocent defendant rather than an investigator seeking truth. Cruz produced legal analysis of prosecutorial misconduct standards. You predetermined your conclusions before examining evidence. You suppressed evidence that contradicted those conclusions. You coached witnesses to provide false testimony. You denied due process to the subjects of your investigation. You selectively edited evidence to support a false narrative. In any courtroom in America, this would be called prosecutorial misconduct and result in dismissal of all charges. Cruz's voice rose with constitutional authority. Congressman, you turned the January 6th committee into a star chamber, the exact type of arbitrary tribunal that our constitutional system was designed to prevent. You denied due process, suppressed evidence, coached witnesses, and predetermined outcomes. You violated every principle of fair investigation and constitutional justice. But Cruz saved his most devastating revelation for last. We have evidence that you coordinated with the Department of Justice to use committee findings as the basis for criminal prosecutions. You turned a congressional investigation into a prosecutor's office, violating the separation of powers and constitutional limits on legislative authority. You became prosecutor, judge, and jury in direct violation of your constitutional role. Schiff was now completely silent, unable to defend against the systematic documentation of his fraud, perjuries, subornation, and constitutional violations. Congressman Schiff, the January 6th committee wasn't an investigation. It was a prosecution. It wasn't seeking truth. It was manufacturing evidence. It wasn't protecting democracy. It was destroying constitutional justice. Cruz delivered his final judgment on Schiff's committee work. You took the most serious congressional investigative tool available and turned it into partisan theater designed to destroy political opponents. You violated every principle of due process, fair investigation, and constitutional justice. You became everything the founders feared about legislative power run amok. Smash, like if Cruz destroyed him completely, comment criminal. If you want, Schiff prosecuted. This is the justice we've waited 6 years for. Ted Cruz stood up from his chair, his towering intellectual and moral presence filling the chamber. Across from him, Adam Schiff sat broken and exposed, his 6-year reign of deception lying in ruins around him like the debris from a controlled demolition of a corrupt empire. Congressman Schiff, Mao. Cruz began, his voice carrying the full weight of constitutional authority and moral judgment accumulated over decades of public service. What the American people have witnessed here today is the complete exposure of a 6-year criminal conspiracy to weaponize the federal government against political opponents. He gestured toward the evidence folders spread across his table like pieces of a completed puzzle. For 6 long years, you have systematically abused every tool of government power available to you. You have lied, deceived, fabricated evidence, suppressed truth, violated constitutional rights, and betrayed the public trust in ways that would have been unimaginable to our founding fathers. Cruz began walking around the chamber, his presence commanding absolute attention from every person present. Let me summarize your documented record of systematic criminality. You spent 3 years lying to the American people about Russian collusion while receiving classified briefings that told you it was false. You fabricated evidence during impeachment proceedings, committing perjury before Congress on live television. You coordinated with big tech to suppress truthful information before a presidential election, potentially altering the outcome through systematic censorship. You abused FISA courts to spy on innocent American citizens, violating their Fourth Amendment rights through fraud and deception. You ran a fraudulent congressional investigation that denied due process, suppressed evidence, and coached witnesses to commit perjury. Each charge hit the chamber like a gavel strike of ultimate judgment. Congressman, you haven't just committed individual acts of misconduct. You have systematically corrupted every institution you've touched. Cruz's voice rose with constitutional authority that filled every corner of the chamber. You corrupted congressional oversight by turning it into partisan warfare. You corrupted intelligence gathering by using it for political surveillance. You corrupted the impeachment process by basing it on fabricated evidence. You corrupted elections by coordinating systematic censorship. You corrupted congressional investigations by denying due process and manufacturing evidence. The systematic nature of the corruption was overwhelming. But most fundamentally, Congressman, you have violated the oath you swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Cruz pulled out his pocket constitution, the document he'd spent his career studying and defending. You became a domestic enemy of the very Constitution you swore to protect. You used government power against American citizens. You violated their constitutional rights for political gain. You turned constitutional processes into weapons against political opponents. You corrupted democratic institutions for partisan advantage. The constitutional analysis was devastating and undeniable. The difference between us congressmen isn't Harvard versus Harvard. It's not lawyer versus lawyer. It's not even Republican versus Democrat. It's the difference between someone who respects constitutional limits on government power and someone who systematically violates them. It's the difference between public service and criminal conspiracy. It's the difference between defending democracy and destroying it. Cruz stopped walking and faced Schiff directly for his final judgment. You asked Americans to trust you with the most sensitive intelligence in our government. You used that trust to lie to them for 3 years. You asked Americans to trust you with surveillance powers. You used those powers to spy on innocent citizens. You asked Americans to trust you with impeachment authority. You used that authority to fabricate evidence and commit perjury. You asked Americans to trust you with election integrity. You used that trust to suppress truthful information and coordinate censorship. You asked Americans to trust you with investigative power. You used that power to deny due process and manufacture false evidence. Adam Schiff sat in complete catatonic shock, his confident media persona replaced by a broken man facing the complete exposure of 6 years of systematic criminality. Congressman, you represent everything our constitutional system was designed to prevent. A government official who would use state power against citizens, abuse institutional authority for personal gain, and corrupt democratic processes for partisan advantage. Cruz's final words carried the weight of constitutional history and American justice. The founders created a constitutional system with limited government separation of powers and protection of individual rights, specifically because they feared officials like you. They understood that power corrupts, and they designed our system to prevent the kind of systematic abuse you have perpetrated. Today, we have proven that their system works when constitutional principles meet criminal corruption, when legal expertise confronts systematic deception, when truth faces 6 years of lies. Constitutional government triumphs over deep state tyranny. Rule of law defeats weaponized government. Truth conquers systematic deception. And America wins when serious constitutional scholars hold criminal politicians accountable. The chamber erupted in sustained applause that lasted for nearly 10 minutes as Americans finally witnessed real accountability for 6 years of systematic government abuse. Smash, like if constitutional law won justice, has finally been served. Share this everywhere. Truth must spread. The immediate aftermath of Ted Cruz's systematic destruction of Adam Schiff created a political earthquake that fundamentally changed how Americans viewed their government and restored faith in constitutional accountability. Within minutes of the hearing's conclusion, social media exploded with unprecedented force. Cruz destroys. Schiff rocketed to #1, trending worldwide, accumulating over 75 million mentions in the first 6 hours. The video clips of Schiff's complete breakdown and Cruz's methodical dismantling of 6 years of systematic deception became the most watched political content in internet history. The footage was devastating and impossible for even sympathetic media to spin. Schiff's arrogant opening attack followed by his progressive humiliation as Cruz systematically destroyed every lie with declassified evidence. The moment when he realized he'd attacked a constitutional scholar who had spent months gathering documented proof of his crimes. His complete psychological collapse when faced with evidence of his own systematic deception and potential criminality. Conservative social media celebrated the constitutional victory with unprecedented enthusiasm. "This is what justice looks like after 6 years of lies," became the rallying cry shared millions of times alongside clips of Cruz's most devastating revelations. Constitutional scholar destroys deep state criminal trended for days as Americans shared evidence of Schiff's Russia hoax lies, FISA abuse, and systematic corruption. Even mainstream media was forced to acknowledge the comprehensiveness of Cruz's evidence-based assault. CNN struggled to defend Schiff's record while their own legal analysts confirmed that Cruz's constitutional arguments were sound and his evidence was authentic. MSNBC went almost completely silent on Schiff coverage, unable to spin documented proof of systematic deception and potential criminal activity. The international media response was equally significant. European outlets praised what they called American constitutional tradition defeating government corruption. The BBC led with "Constitutional Scholar Exposes Systematic Government Abuse," while media across the democratic world celebrated the triumph of legal expertise over political deception. The political earthquake spread rapidly through Washington. Within 24 hours of the hearing, Adam Schiff announced he was taking an extended leave of absence from public appearances for personal health reasons. Translation: he was going into hiding to avoid further scrutiny and potential criminal prosecution. The Department of Justice announced it was reviewing Cruz's evidence for potential criminal referrals. The FISA court issued a formal statement condemning the systematic abuse of surveillance authorities and referring the matter for prosecution. Congressional ethics committees in both chambers announced investigations into Schiff's conduct. 23 other Democratic members of Congress who had supported Schiff's various investigations announced they wouldn't seek re-election rather than face similar constitutional scrutiny of their roles in weaponizing government. The Democratic Party went into full damage control mode as voters realized that the Russia investigation FISA abuse in January 6th committee had been systematic fraud operations. Republican celebration was immediate and sustained. Conservative senators gave Cruz a standing ovation that lasted 20 minutes when he returned to the Senate floor. Republican governors across the country issued statements praising Cruz for finally holding the deep state accountable with constitutional authority. President Trump issued a comprehensive statement calling the hearing the greatest vindication in American political history and praising Cruz for using constitutional scholarship to expose the greatest political fraud ever perpetrated against the American people. The conservative legal movement experienced a renaissance as young lawyers saw constitutional expertise triumph over political deception. Law school applications from conservative students surged 400% as young people recognized that serious legal preparation could defeat even the most sophisticated political corruption. But perhaps the most significant impact was on American political culture itself. For 6 years, Schiff and his allies had dominated political discourse through media manipulation, systematic deception, and abuse of government power. Cruz's methodical destruction proved that constitutional scholarship, legal expertise, and documented evidence could still defeat even the most entrenched political corruption when properly presented. The intelligence community underwent fundamental reforms as Americans demanded accountability for the systematic abuse of surveillance powers. New oversight mechanisms were established with constitutional scholars given prominent roles in ensuring government surveillance complied with constitutional requirements. Educational institutions began emphasizing constitutional literacy as an antidote to government abuse. Parents across America used Cruz's performance as an example of why serious constitutional education mattered more than political theater and media manipulation. 6 months later, Adam Schiff quietly announced he would not seek any future elected office, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities in the private sector. His political career, built on systematic deception and abuse of government power, had been destroyed by a single afternoon of constitutional scholarship and documented evidence. Federal prosecutors announced criminal investigations into multiple aspects of Schiff's conduct, including potential perjury charges for his Ukraine testimony, FISA abuse charges for systematic surveillance violations, and conspiracy charges for coordinating election interference through censorship. The man who had been called the Democrats' most effective investigator spent his final months in Congress largely silent, having learned that constitutional scholars with evidence were more powerful than deep state operatives with media allies. Ted Cruz's constitutional victory became a symbol of what American government could be when serious people with serious preparation held corrupt officials accountable to constitutional principles. The hearing that destroyed Schiff's career proved that in America, constitutional law and documented truth could still triumph over systematic deception and government abuse. Today we prove that constitutional principles are stronger than political corruption, Cruz said in his final statement. Legal expertise defeats systematic deception, documentary evidence conquers 6 years of lies, and American constitutional government triumphs when serious scholars hold criminal politicians accountable. This is what happens when we choose constitutional law over political theater, when we demand truth over systematic deception, and when we hold government officials to the constitutional standards they swore to uphold. The deep state met constitutional scholarship today, and constitutional scholarship won. The most satisfying constitutional victory in American political history was complete. The systematic exposure of 6 years of government abuse proved that American constitutional principles, when properly defended by knowledgeable advocates, could still triumph over even the most sophisticated political corruption. Subscribe for more constitutional accountability. Comment what deep state operative should be exposed next. Share this victory for constitutional government. America is finally healing from 6 years of systematic lies.